Hey there, retro gamers. On this episode we get real intense and crank up the frustration meter of one of the hardest games the NES has to offer. Yes, we're talking about the adrenaline-pumping action game, Ninja Gaiden. This is said to be possibly one of the hardest games on the NES. But why is that? Well, let's pop it into Nintendo and take a closer look. Now, Ninja Gaiden originally did not debut on the NES. It was an arcade game originally released in 1988 by Tecmo. The arcade was a beat-em-up style game where you had to knock everybody out on screen in order to advance. A year later, Tecmo created a home version for the NES and Famicom systems. However, this game was very different from the arcade version. They changed it to a side-scrolling action game instead of a beat-em-up game. It was also one of the first games to introduce cutscenes. After you finish the chapter, you would get to see the next part of the story, making you want to keep playing the game. The home version turned out to be so popular that Tecmo went on to produce 2 more games for the NES, making it a trilogy. Each game added new features. The second game had stage hazards, which made the levels more challenging to get through. And the third game is where it really got hard, because they took away the option of having unlimited continues. So if you died a lot in Ninja Gaiden 3, you have to start all the way back from level 1 all over again. This is most likely one of the most hardest trilogies on the NES. I'm going to focus on the original Ninja Gaiden today. Perhaps we can get to the other 2 another time. Starting off with the backstory. The storyline to Ninja Gaiden is about a ninja named Ryu Hayabusa. He finds a letter his father left for him saying he might not return from a duel. So Ryu goes to America to avenge his father's death. After he arrives there, he finds out that his father, Ken, was previously working with an archaeologist, Walter Smith. Ken and Smith have been the gatekeepers of 2 demon statues when brought together will awaken an ancient demon that had been previously defeated by shinobi 700 years ago. Later on, the CIA finds out that a man by the name of the Jackyo plans to take the statues and awake the demon in order to take over the world. Now it's up to Ryu to stop him and get the statues back before disaster strikes. The cinematic gameplay helps make the game more enjoyable and is a very creative take on the storyline. Now to explain why this is one of the hardest games on the NES. First off, one issue is that the enemies respawn, just like in Ninja Turtles, but worse. If they are anywhere near the edge of the screen, they will reappear infinitely. This makes it very hard to advance in certain parts of the game, especially if it's a hard to reach jump and an enemy is in your way. It's nearly impossible to make the jump unless you've mastered the arts of ninja powers and after dying at least 20,000 times. Speaking of dying, the other issue that leads to so many deaths in this game is when you get hit, Ryu gets knocked back. And most of the time when this happens, there's a pit behind you, increasing your risk of falling to your death. So most of the time, your death will be from falling rather than your life bar being depleted of health. And some of the levels are so overcrowding with enemies it could take nearly an hour or more trying to get through them. There is one technique that some people use to help them out. There's a glitch to make the enemy disappear by letting them walk back to the edge of the screen at the right time, so they will despawn. But the nail that seals the coffin is at the very end of the game. Instead of one final boss, you have to fight off 3 different ones. And if you die on any of them, you are sent all the way back to the beginning of the chapter at stage 6-1. It will allow you to skip all the bosses you've beaten, but it won't refill your life bar when you got back to the boss you left on. Clearly we can tell that all you're gonna do for the majority of this game is die, 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 and die. Now the game may be difficult, but it does give you some items to help your progress throughout your adventure. First is the throwing star. Nothing too fancy, just your basic throwing weapon that you can only throw in a horizontal direction. Next is the windmill throwing star. This one works like a boomerang. Once you toss this, it will continue to fly back and forth around the stage until you catch it. Very effective for clearing out an area of enemies. Also, we have the fire wheel. This shoots a ring of fire in a diagonal direction. This comes in handy when you're trying to clear out enemies on platforms above you and getting items out of your reach. The most powerful power-up is the jump slash. This allows you to turn into a spinning blade of death when you jump. You will tear through bosses like tissue paper and plow through enemies like they were nothing. The only catch is, in order to use any of these, you will need to collect these little boxes of spiritual strength. Purple is worth 5 and orange is worth 10. And each ability will use up some of your spiritual strength. Also, if you die, half of your spiritual strength that you were carrying will be taken from you. You will also lose any ability that you were carrying with you at that time. Other items you will find along the way are the invincibility fire wheel, bonus points, the time freeze hourglass, the health potion, and the extra life. The control in this game is very straightforward. The D-pad controls Ryu's direction of movement and allows him to duck. A button jumps and B uses the sword. If you have an item, in order to use it, you'll have to press up on the D-pad and the B button at the same time. Everything feels really smooth and at just the right pace. There are times where you have to be quick with the buttons in order to do wall jumps to climb to certain areas. It's just like in Batman for the NES where you have to keep wall jumping to get to certain parts of the level. However, this was changed in the second game where Ryu was actually able to climb the walls rather than have to wall jump all the time. Moving to graphics. The graphics in this game really show the NES's full potential. The stages look incredibly detailed and the cutscenes look phenomenal for 8-bit. The amount of colors used in this game make it very enjoyable to look at. It makes it eye candy and really makes you want to keep playing it in order to see the rest of it. Even the enemy sprites look extremely detailed and look realistic for the 8-bit era of gaming. At last we come to the sound. The sound effects in this game are very good. The only bad thing I can say about it is that it's the same sound every time you kill an enemy. And it can get a little repetitive. But it is a different sound for hitting a boss, so I give credit for that. But those are not just the only two sounds in the game. There are many different sounds, from items, weapons, and enemies. Not to mention the cutscenes have their own too. The best feature of all that I'm sure everyone can agree on is the music. The soundtrack of this game is very memorable. It has one of the best on the NES, along with Super Mario Bros. And Contra. The music influences the atmosphere of the cutscenes and helps the story flow much smoother, giving the player a much better understanding of what's going on. Although I'm pretty sure for anyone who has played this game has this tune permanently stuck in their head for all eternity. At last it's time to rate the game and give its overall score. The storyline for Ninja Gaiden is very original, and the addition of the cutscenes helped the story flow even smoother. An excellent addition to the game to help the player get a better understanding of what's going on. The storyline for this game gets a 10 out of 10. This game shows no mercy when it comes to difficulty. This is by far one of the most difficult games on the NES. A first-time player is bound to die and struggle a lot countless times, although it is still entertaining at the same time as well. So because of the major difficulty, it gets a 3 out of 10. The graphics in this game are amazing. They really show the NES at its full potential. The cutscenes are well animated, and the use of colors really make this game stand out and make people want to pick up the controller and keep playing. It gets a 10 out of 10. The sound effects are very good, and the music is excellent. One of the most memorable on the NES. And the music also helps with telling the story as well as setting the tone for each of the scenes. They get a 10 out of 10. The control is very fluent and feels very smooth. However, it can be very difficult to pull off those tricky wall jumps when they are required. So for that, it gets a 9 out of 10. Last we come to replayability. Despite being an extremely difficult game, this is very addictive as well. I will pop this in the NES anytime. This is a replayable game. It gets a 10 out of 10. So after adding up all the scores, Ninja Gaiden for the NES gets a total score of 7 out of 10. So to wrap things up, Ninja Gaiden may be one of the hardest, if not the hardest, NES game out there. It is still an enjoyable game to play. If you think games are hard today, you ain't seen nothing until you've played this. If you don't have the NES, you can get this on the Wii store and try it out for yourself. I challenge someone to try and beat this game. Thanks for watching, everyone. Catch you next time.